This is why no one plays the standard 5-star characters. Like, I think the answer is going to be relatively simple. They're just bad, especially in comparison to nowadays, and a lot of them weren't even good at the time that the game released. But I want to see like a more in-depth, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, knows a lot about Genshin. Let's see what he has to say.
That, at least based on my history playing gachas, is a questionable decision is how veteran 5-star characters, an unusual practice implemented by Genshin Impact that, at least based on my history playing gachas, is a questionable decision is how veteran 5-star characters are not reinstated into permanent circulation after their maiden voyage. When looking at most other gacha titles,
I wish they would do that.
Once the future unit's banner runs its course, either they get put straight into the available pool where you can theoretically obtain them year-round, or the developers wait until their rerun banner anywhere between 6 to 12 months to do so, with the exception of limited time ones, collaborations, or holiday themes.
I really wish they would do that.
You can imagine my surprise when I found out that Genshin, and I suppose by extension most other mainstream gacha titles like HSR, WUA, and ZZZ, don't follow that formula, even dating back to the very first ever feature.
I wish they did that. It would make it a little bit. It would be a little bit better. But they slap all the 4 stars in there, and once in the blue moon, we get an extra character. I'll be honest. I think the only reason we got Daya in that banner is because there was all those leaks or whatever it was going on about her and how she was gonna be ass, and then they didn't really change shit. So I think they figured, we're gonna get what we can for this character and then just leave her.
5-star Venti, not a single character has been added to the standard banner that wasn't already intended to be brought there in the first place.
Yep, see, they were already intended.
Too many characters where it's becoming progressively more unsustainable given the 2 banner capacity per cycle. As of today, only 3 new 5-star units were brought into permanent circulation, bringing the total pool of 5 stars to 8. Coaching Chichi Mona Chin Tinari Dia and Misaki, having made a wide.
You know what's fucking crazy to this day? This doesn't make sense to me. The reason, I still believe this, the reason they give you Noelle as the tutorial banner, let me turn my camera back on. The reason you get Noelle as the tutorial character, in my personal opinion, this is my fact, the reason you get her is because this game to this day doesn't have a 5-star Geo character in the standard banner. Nobody really talks about that, but that is weird. Why? Is it because Geo is just so different than the rest of the elements? It doesn't really react well with anything? And then there's, physical, but physical don't exist, bro. That's just a psyop, right? There was no Warren Bossing say,
I know a place on 4 out of the original 5 and even making one on Dia when she first came out, there's an obvious pattern among the Genshin 5-star units in that they're not exactly favorites throughout the fandom, nor do they really have the highest amount of relevance in this day and age. In light of that, I wanted to make a Why No One Plays episode on the 8 of them collectively.
Isn't it Mona still better? Isn't Mona's probably better than everybody else still in this shit? Even the new added ones?
With
those
the focus
3?
on the 3 new ones and talk about why there's such a caliber below the majority of the limited 5 stars.
I don't know shit about her.
What I find most interesting about the standard banner 5 stars is that they serve as an excellent point of reference on how the progression of power creep has been affecting the game. As one of the more power creep resistant gacha titles, Genshin has been able to maintain the relevance of a wide number of version 1 and 2 units despite us now about to enter
power creep resistance? I don't know if I would say that. Especially with the way they introduce new mechanics and shit. Like, I couldn't deal with that one. The Night Soul shit, that's a hell no. I think that was a terrible idea for MiHoYo, but they did what they did. And what's done is done.
Version 6. Throughout that time, members like Jean, Keqing, Diluc, and such have had moments where their standing in the metagame improved a fair bit following the advent of a new character or a mechanic that they could synergize with.
She's so
that being
cool.
said,
she's such a bad bitch. But when I saw that character, I knew that I would need to hop off the game soon. They had to make a support for Plunge. Like, I don't know if she even supported anything else. I'm pretty sure she had some stuff in her kit for other things, but it seemed like her main thing was, we got Plunge support. And at the time, from my understanding, there was one character that was Plunge, and that was Zhao. But they added gaming at the same time with her.
With their second win, the standard 5 stars at large have been losing presence at a considerable pace. While Diluc may have found a return to form with the release of Arena.
Wait, what? Never mind.
Arlecchino
Wait, why are we using Plunge in the loop?
May have found a return.
Is this what Cloud Retainer or whatever?
To form with the release of Arena.
Hey, Plunges are doing some decent damage.
Kino and Mavuika's
Okay,
arrivals have
never
all but
mind.
pushed him back down again by measure of opportunity cost. The same applies to Koting. She was elevated to a fairly strong position by way of Aggravate playing exactly to her 1000 cuts win condition, but she too would get overshadowed by Clorent, and then later the trio of Nanlan Electra units moving the goalpost once more. Barring Chi-Chi, the fourth thing, the other 4 5-stars in the initial pool essentially got buffed in one way or another, giving them a chance to be viable in the metagame again, if only for a short time, and while they're still more than serviceable for most of the game's content, our selection of available means to handle that content has expanded beyond what they could remotely account for, even with that little boost. It's very much a case of those indirect buffs being force multiplied.
I want physical to get some love, bro. I can't front. I love Eula. I haven't been able to really. Well, I don't play the game anymore. I be trying to. Like, I know the whole Wonderland thing is going on. I'm gonna try it out for that. But other than that, bro, I just can't. But I want physical to get some love. Maybe I'll make a video on that at some point.
But when someone comes around with a higher baseline than them, there's only so much amplifying a supposed mediocre character can achieve. In their defense, the original 5 stars were amplifying a
I've never
force
seen
multiplier.
shit about Vanessa besides her Sonic run. That was the coolest shit.
Baseline than them,
You
there's
throwing
only
ass?
so much amplifying a supposed
Her ult look
mediocre
cool.
character can
What the
achieve.
fuck?
In their defense, the original 5 stars were conceptualized and balanced around just the framework of version 1.0. You can't blame them for failing to stand the test of time.
Makes
By
sense.
that
I
logic,
can't be mad at that
one would
either.
assume when Hoyo eventually adds new
But
members
you would
to
think,
the permanent
these
roster,
later ones would be
that
better.
they would be balanced around the time they came out to alleviate that. Yes, but also no. In the case of Tignati, people were very optimistic about the future of standard 5 stars after seeing what he had to offer.
He was
Running out
actually
the wind of
decent.
Dendro's novelty and strength, Tignati established himself as a solid DPS character for quicking teams, namely in single target fashion.
But
Though
he seemed like he was
eventually
pretty good.
superseded by I'll Hate Them, who practically outperformed him even in his own niche. For a standard banner 5-star, Tignati was a cut above his predecessors in strength and quality. With the advantage of being permanent, players could eventually, with an insane amount of luck, acquire further copies of him, making his constellations
Yep.
go from something that only the whales had access to something one could reasonably factor into him when deciding
Yeah, I
who
can't
to
say nothing about that.
play. Although, to be fair, with the exception
The thing is, like you said, with the same amount of luck, you're gonna struggle to get constellations unless you've been locking in from the beginning of this game, like day 1 till now. I'd be surprised if you have anybody C6, like any 5-star C6, without spending money. I would be hella surprised if you got anybody C6 yet. Because you gotta count, I think, does Genshin put weapons in the character banner? I can't remember. They put 5-star weapons, correct me, I don't remember. I
all
think
of
they
Tignati's constellations offer noticeably less impact than that of a limited time unit. His position in the metagame remained fairly stable
they're in
all
the
throughout
standard
versions
banner.
3
They
and
go with
4,
the
and
other banner?
objectively speaking, there's nothing egregiously wrong with the guy for what he has to offer. If you're trying to dip your feet into Dendro, you could do much worse than him. I think I speak for most people when I say he's one of the better units to lose your 50-50 on. So what happened to him? Nothing really, save for everyone else getting stronger. But that's ultimately what
That's the
happens.
thing about Gacha games.
Tignati's a
Characters
DPS
don't get
character,
worse,
but
they
most
get-
of his
other
abilities
characters just come out
derived
and be
from
are
Dendro's
better.
his power supplementing his own damage, making his strength a bit deceptive in that it wasn't him that carried the strength, rather he and the elements splitting it. Being one of the last members of the 2nd generation, he would get eclipsed by the very soon arrival of the 3rd generation, and though technically there hasn't been any new Dendro attackers
know
up
shit about
until
that
the
girl.
eventual release of Kineshin 5.0, the other elements all got stronger, making him fall off in relativity as he never was one of the best Dendro units to begin with. When even Nahida and I'll Hate Them haven't been getting the same numbers in the current landscape that they once had, expectedly.
What the fuck is going on in this game? Nahida? Is Nahida I know she's still usable, obviously. But is she starting to fall off? I thought Nahida was going to be a damn near for good. I feel like, if anything, the Archons, specifically, should be on another level. If anybody's going to be on a level where they don't get really power crept, I think the Archons would make the most sense. Keep them OP. Everybody else, like, realistically, I don't think Venti should be worse than Kazuha. But I guess it's also whatever.
B-list unit like Tignati, whose equity was already tenuous to begin with, would be the first to go. Keep in mind, Tignati is considered to be the strongest of the 8 intrinsically speaking. I'm sure you can infer that the other 2 haven't been doing nearly as well.
I heard
Later in
magic
version
about
3
Daya off the
came
bat.
Dia, one of the more prominent characters in the Sumeru arc
I was
line
going with
questline,
Daya, I didn't know
having
it
one
was
of the
Dia.
most badass designs to boot and a
Her
visually
design is so
appealing
cool
elemental
too, yep.
burst, literally throwing her sword away and choosing to throw hands instead. Expectations ran very high for Dia given the fact that around that time Pyro went from being one of the best elements in the game to one of the worst. Everyone thought that she would be the successor to Hu Tao, someone who could dish out tons of pyro damage but with hopefully a more modernized baseline, which only made it all the more soul-crushing to find out instead of taking a step forward from Hu Tao, they f***ing went backwards instead. Dia was so weak when she first came out that she was even worse than Diluc, or even a number of 4 stars. To this day, she is one of the worst designed kits in the game, almost as if there were 2 different developers
Wait,
working
her
on
kit
it.
doesn't
One
work
half of
together?
her
Wait, what did I say? While she'd already be the best Birdian trigger in the game, there are no teams that actually make full use of her entire kit. I don't remember what Birdian is. Is that when you shoot the dendro things, the blooms?
one of the worst designed kits in
Yeah, I see the Birdian thing pop up. Okay.
the game,
Or
almost
Birdian
as
or
if there were
whatever.
2 different developers working on her. One half of her kit is aimed at soaking up damage for her team like a cover tank
Oh, yeah, I
and
remember hearing
supplying
about that.
off-field pyro damage at the same time, while the other half is supposed to be DPS oriented. The problem is that not only did she fail on both sides, but they were mutually exclusive from one another. If you wanted to play towards one win condition, you had to forego the other, and vice versa, which is one of the
That
biggest
sucks.
missed opportunities in Genshin
Who the
history
hell is
to
this
not
chick? I've seen
intermingle
her. I
the
don't
two
know
of
what she
them.
does though.
For the uninitiated, Dia's skill has
Yeah,
to
she
absorb
like she would be
damage
a
taken
support
by her
character.
team and store it up to a cap. What does she do with that stored damage? Absolutely nothing. It's just there to put a ceiling on how much you can tank with her skill. As for her ultimate, it's a flurry of intense blows in quick succession of one another. Thing is, they don't count as normal attacks, preventing her from capitalizing on follow-ups like Yelan and Xingqiu's bursts. Couple that with the
sucks.
numbers being abysmal across the board, and the community was almost tempted to call her even worse than Chi-Chi with how unusable she was.
Don't do
Ironically, her
that.
cost
She's not on Chi-Chi's level, right? The thing is, Chi-Chi didn't seem bad, especially early on. Like, she gets the job done in terms of healing. But that's the thing, all she does is that. If Chi-Chi had something extra going on outside of her healing, I think she'd be pretty good.
Solutions are
But she
quite
does
good for a standard
nothing
unit,
else,
finding
pretty
ways to
much
boost the
besides a fuck
DPS a
ton of
fair
heals.
bit, but given that only half of her kit
I
is
would think
geared
that-
towards
and I don't know if
DPS,
he'll
and her
keep up
baseline
anymore.
being so poor to begin with, if I'm not mistaken, even a C6 Dia loses to a C0 Hu Tao and Lini or C6 Gaming. Public opinion towards Dia sort of received an improvement thanks to mild Zeniju and Neuvillette and a few applications in reverse melt, but without question she was one of the most disappointing characters in the game relative to how much people hyped her up. The
Hot
one
trash.
advantage to her was that Shangling aside, consistent off-field pyro damage was in short supply, so maybe you could have found a reason to use her in some niche application, but at this point it would be no exaggeration to say, there is no reason to use her whatsoever, nor will there ever be unless Soil finally decides to fix her functionally unplayable kit. So on one hand, we had a pretty good standard 5-star come out in the form of Tignati, and then we had one that was by all accounts an abject failure of a character period,
and now
never won a
she's-
5-star.
she's
With
about to be
only
the
2
middle of the
units to
road
look
one?
at, it was difficult to form a conclusion on where Hoyo
Mizuki,
wants the
whatever her
standard
name
banner
is?
units to be in the metagame.
like
We needed a
Mizuki,
minimum of
Mizuki or
3
some
more
shit?
to better gauge where things are. Inconveniently, however, whether it's because of the backlash towards Dia or if Hoyo intended to right from the get-go, we will not receive another standard 5-star for almost 2 years. During this time, the roster began to power creep at an accelerated rate to where by the
Yep,
time
I
the
heard
third
about
one
this.
came out, even Tignati was beginning to lose traction.
Yeah,
And
please, any Genshin players in the comments, tell me. I heard when Malvika released, it fucked everything up. I heard she was just extremely broken. I don't know if she still is, considering what's going on, whatever is today, because we're, I guess, in a new region or whatever. But please tell me how broken she was in the comments. I really want to understand. And I'm not talking about like her team with Sit Lolly. No, I'm talking about just whatever else besides that. Because I understand Sit Lolly's kind of meant for her. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard.
Even Misaki, an Anemo character. A most unusual one in terms of
He's
appearance,
Animo?
but
Never mind. I
interestingly,
thought she was Hydro. So we got an Animo. We got what? We got another Animo. Before
Not a
we
mem-
still got a Geo 5-star in the banner. That's still
for
wild.
the version region, instead hailing from Inazuma. Well, technically she took a trip to Natlan on sabbatical, so I guess we can say it's Natlan inspired, but I digress. What does she do? The long and short of it is, she's an Anemo attacker with a focus on
She's
sword
hot as
DPS, being the
fuck,
first
though.
main
Damn.
attacker who specializes in that reaction. Sounds like a novel concept, doesn't
What
it?
does she do?
Yes, Russ. What does she do? The long and short of it is, she's an Anemo attacker with a focus on swirl DPS, being the first main attacker who specializes in that reaction. Sounds like a novel
Oh,
concept,
she's the main
doesn't it?
attacker.
Historically, Swirl was seen as a supportive reaction with little capacity for being used offensively outside of EV shredding and AoE. We were exploring new territory here, and if done well, it could bring more attention to the standard banner. As a convenience, Misaki brought her own sustain to the table as well. The positives ended there though. There's a reason we haven't had an Anemo DPS who focused on Swirl, and that's because Swirl doesn't really do damage. It's
not a high damaging reaction, is it?
Scales off elemental mastery like the other transformative reactions, but the scaling and frequency of application for Swirl leaves a lot to be desired, being one of, if not now, the weakest damaging elemental reaction in the game, and for a good reason. Oftentimes you're supposed to pair Swirl with a different reaction, the most popular one being Taser so you can spread everything. Problem is, being unable to normal attack while activating her skill prevents you from capitalizing on many of the best Taser fighting members like Shincho and Yellow, sort of defeating the purpose of being a Swirl boosting attacker. From a DPS point of view, Misaki scales rather poorly, but his damage on her skill and burst are quite low, and even if you stack a ton of elemental mastery, again Swirl's a very weak offensive reaction. Through Constellations, you can get some pretty noteworthy buffs, C2 and 6 in particular having a lot of potential, but her buffing capability isn't really much to write home about. Sucrose cannot perform her in that department. Misaki does consolidate healing, which can help you believe she can generate fanfare stacks, but there are two issues to that as well. First and foremost, it's
I want one character that can cook in the standard banner. Like, I don't care who it is. Just one that can kind of be worth a damn, like, nowadays. It's not asking for much. I don't
just
think so,
not good enough. Unless you have C2 for Arena and Misaki's healing alone falls short, preventing you from capping out fanfare quickly enough for it to be efficient. Secondly, Farina is a personal DPS booster. Mizuki's a reaction DPS booster. The two aren't mutually exclusive, but we just established her base damage is quite poor.
I forgot about Farina.
Just one more thing.
Did she like do everything basically?
Mizuki's a main attacker. In order to make full use of her,
you did all of this for this character. Gave her this cool ass design, did this whole trailer, and then
DPS slot, and she comes nowhere close to matching the game's current top performers, even at max constellation. Across the three new members, two of them were practically dead on arrival, while one of them was serviceable for all but maybe 3/4 of a year. Plainly speaking, it's not a very good look for the standard banner. For what it's worth, any 5-star being added is of course better than none at all, but the problem with the standard banner units is how they've always been perceived as a caliber below everything else, even though they realistically don't and shouldn't have to be. In many other gachas, losing the 50-50 is nowhere near as soul-crushing compared to Genshin, HSR, and whatnot, since 1. 5 stars in general offer a universal benefit to the player for simply having them, and or 2, the permanent pool contains units that came out just recently in addition to the old ones. For example, back when I played Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, every
Jeez, this looks ass. This is a gacha game, right?
The game had what is called a Trust Master reward, and for the higher rarities, a Super Trust Master reward. These are equipment you could obtain upon maxing out their TMR or STMR to 100%, either via items or by using them in battle long enough. Acquiring additional copies of a character was therefore not only beneficial, but even paramount for taking on endgame content. People were chasing after dupes of old characters while going after new ones, because at the very least you'd be able to get something out of them. Genshin has no such mechanic. Acquiring a copy of Jean or Chi-Chi or Misaki is of little benefit to the player unless they're actively trying to use them. As well, compared to other titles, Genshin has no dupes. Subsequent copies of a character become constellations.
Does it have dupes? What happens when you're maxed out with a character? You get a copy of them.
Which ties back to the overall point that unless you're using the 5-star, you get nothing out of more copies of them. This applies in tandem to the fact that Genshin's standard 5 stars are all mediocre at best and, relatively speaking, unusable at worst. I don't think I'm alone in saying I wouldn't be as upset about losing a 50-50 if I pulled a constellation for other version 1 or 2 units. Say I'm trying to pull for Columbina or Varka or Alice and lose a 50-50, but I get a Kazuha or Shogun or...
What? Why don't they just do that already? Like, after you're done with a region, the last region's characters should go into the banner, so you have a chance of getting them. That would be such a good change for Genshin. Because I'm not going to get excited getting Chi-Chi nowadays. I would get excited, like he just said. He said Kaza. I wouldn't get excited getting damn near anybody else. Maybe that's just my view, but I don't see the point.
Hu Tao. Obviously it sucks to not get the unit I was originally after, but as a consolation, I can power up one of the good characters I have, which if you think about it, can also be great for preserving the value of existing characters. When a unit falls off quote unquote, it's mostly in relevance to C0, C1, or in rare cases C2. But when you start entering C3 or higher, even old units can get a sizable boost in power. C1690 for example is like going from base to Super Saiyan. There's a tremendous leap in power between C0 to C6, understandably so, seeing as you need to spend upwards of $1,000 to get them. Therein lies the issue. Turning characters into standard units makes the possibility.
The prices these gacha games charge for a character? This is why I tell motherfuckers to be greedy when it comes to gacha games. You don't want to feel like you asking for too much, bro. They charge, like look, for a singular character, it's about the price of like 4 or 5 games. You should be able to ask for a little bit more, bro. It's not gonna hurt the poor little company.
Of getting high constellations on them, just that, a possibility. If a player knows they can eventually progress their veteran units over time, that inherently diminishes their urgency to pull for them. In other words, far less people will pull for a 5-star rerun if they're already in circulation all year round, which is why Hoyo doesn't want to add units to the permanent pool. Conversely, those who are added to the permanent pool are made intentionally mediocre so as not to undermine the significance of pulling for the limited characters. Even their constellations are not as much of a difference maker as a feature 5-star. Say for instance back in version 2 they decided to make Raiden Shogun permanent, and through sheer RNG you managed to pull 6 copies of her by losing X amount of 50/50s. At C6, Shogun's a beast, easily destroying the likes of C0 Clarent and Varesa. That's
crazy that Archon needs to be C6. I hate constellations as a concept, bro. In every game they're in, the little media shit in Zenless, I hate damn things. Like, the fact that I need duplicate, no. Nothing at all. I don't like constellations, though. The fact you need duplicates of a character. It's like a system that works well in gachas, but nowhere else.
Gonna be one less person who's easily convinced to pull for those 2 units, which means less potential revenue to be made. In totality, no one plays the standard banner units because if they're strong, that lowers the pressure to pull for new characters. Mizuki and Dia being underwhelming was completely intentional for the purposes of maintaining that separation of the classes between the permanent and the limited. It doesn't apply to 4-stars because even at C6, a 4-star won't shake up the meta too much, but a C6 5-star, especially if they were a limited character that turns standard, most definitely will. I do hope in the future Hoyo acquiesces a little though. In my opinion, plenty of older 5-stars can safely be made standard without affecting the popularity of new characters. There has to be a win-win solution, where by making some of the limited units permanent, they could alleviate the overcrowding problem and even allow those units to see relevance in the metagame since again, 5-star constellations can make a world of difference. But what do you guys think about permanent 5-stars? Do you agree or disagree with my points? You're welcome to share in the comments down below. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @FarSerm, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Alright. Great video. All I'm gonna say about this video is he's pretty much right on the money of what I think. Like, I get why they need to have these characters not be put in the public banner overall, but bro, how many people are really saying, damn, I can't wait to get Chi-Chi today, and I hope they put her in that fucking banner, or, not even Chi-Chi, let's not even use Chi-Chi. Let's use another character. They're like, damn, speaking of the devil, damn, I can't wait to get Ayato. I don't think people are looking for Ayato. There's a lot of people that go for the meta, so they just want whatever's the best. I don't know if the best DPS is maybe Nuvalet still, I don't know. Vika, maybe. But you got that side of the argument. But there's people like, no, like they need to make these chase characters. Nobody's chasing for those motherfuckers no more. But that's all I gotta say. Great video from Vars, bro. Go subscribe to him. This was fire. I might watch more Genshin stuff on stream. I don't know if I can bring myself to play the game, but I'm kind of fascinated to see how this game goes from time to time.